Nobody teaches you the real reason you're bad with money. Not your parent, not school, not the financial advice industry, which has spent decades pretending that the problem is a lack of information. Learn the right formulas, follow the right rules, and your financial life will fall into place. That's the story they sell. Here's the problem with that story. Managing money well has almost nothing to do with how smart you are. Morgan Housel spent years as a financial journalist watching brilliant people make catastrophic financial decisions and ordinary people with no special knowledge quietly build extraordinary wealth. And what he found, what became the core of one of the most important books written about money in the last decade, is that your relationship with money is shaped almost entirely by psychology, by the invisible stories you carry, by the world you grew up in, by the specific moment in history when you first formed your beliefs about what money means and what it can do. And until you understand that, no financial advice in the world will actually stick. Let's get into it. The first thing Housel establishes, and it's the foundation everything else is built on, is that no one is crazy. That sounds obvious, but think about what it actually means. When you see someone make a financial decision that looks completely irrational from the outside, someone buying lottery tickets every week on a tight income, or someone keeping all their savings in cash because they don't trust the stock market, or someone spending lavishly on things they can't afford, the easy conclusion is that they don't understand money, that they need better information. But Housel argues something more uncomfortable. Every financial decision a person makes sense to them, given the information they have and the experiences that shaped how they see the world. The person who doesn't trust banks might have grown up in a family that was wiped out in a financial crisis. The person who spends freely might have watched a parent die young and concluded that deferred gratification is a gamble not worth taking. The person buying lottery tickets might be rationally purchasing the only form of hope their income can actually afford. Your experiences with money are a tiny, unrepresentative sample of how the world actually works, but they make up close to 100% of how you think about it. Here's what that means practically. Two people can look at the exact same financial data and come to opposite conclusions, not because one of them is wrong, but because they're drawing on completely different lived experience. A person who was 25 during the 2008 financial crisis carries a different view of risk than someone who was 25 during the bull market of the 1990s. A person who grew up poor and made it to financial stability thinks about security differently than someone who grew up wealthy and never experienced its absence. Neither of them is irrational. They're both responding reasonably to the world they actually experience. This is the first psychological trap around money. We assume that because financial decisions have objectively correct answers, the people making bad ones must be making an information error. But most financial mistakes aren't information error. They're experience error. They're the result of applying lessons that were completely correct in one context to a different context where they no longer apply. Here's where it gets more specific. Housel has a line that stops most readers cold. Wealth is what you don't see. Think about how we measure success. The expensive car, the large house, the designer clothes, the visible markers of money spent. We look at them and assume we're seeing wealth, but we're not. We're seeing the opposite of wealth. We're seeing money that has already been converted into things. Wealth is the money that hasn't been spent yet. It's the investments that haven't been cashed out. It's the optionality, the future, the unspent resources sitting quietly in accounts most people will never see. The most genuinely wealthy people you have ever met are probably invisible to you, because real wealth, the kind that actually provides freedom and security, looks like nothing from the outside. It looks like a person driving a modest car, living in a house smaller than their income could support, wearing clothes with no visible brand. It looks like restraint, and restraint doesn't photograph wealth. It doesn't generate envy or admiration. It just compounds quietly over time. The psychological trap here is profound. Modern life is saturated with social comparison. Social media has industrialized the display of consumption, and the things that get displayed are by definition the things that have already been spent. We are surrounded constantly by a curated exhibition of wealth destruction, of money converted into visible signal, and we mistake it for wealth creation. This is why people with genuinely high incomes so frequently have nothing, because high income creates a larger surface area for social comparison, a bigger display budget, and unless the psychology is right, more money just means more elaborate ways to convert wealth into visibility. Housel's point is not that spending is wrong. It's that the things we admire and emulate are often the exact opposite of what actually produces financial security. Now let's talk about something Housel calls enough, and why it might be the most psychologically difficult concept in personal finance. There is a phenomenon among high earners, among people who have achieved the financial goals they once set for themselves, that almost nobody talks about honestly. The goalpost move. You set a number. When I have this much saved, I'll feel secure. When I earn this salary, I'll stop worrying. When I reach this level, I'll be satisfied. And then you get there, and the number shifts. The goalpost move moves further down the field. And the anxiety doesn't decrease, it mutates. You now have more to lose. The comparison set has changed. The people around you have also moved. The target, somehow, is always slightly ahead of wherever you are. Research on hedonic adaptation has documented this relentlessly. Human beings are extraordinarily good at adjusting to new circumstances. The things we believed would make us happy do make us happy, briefly. And then they become the new baseline, and we want more. This isn't weakness. It's a feature of human cognition that was probably adaptive for most of human history. The desire for more kept people striving, improving, surviving. But in a modern economy with sophisticated financial products and social media fueling constant comparison, that same mechanism becomes a trap. Because there is always more. There is always someone with a larger number. The race, if you are running it by default, does not have a finish line. Housel argues that the ability to define enough to consciously decide what you actually need, rather than chasing a target that the comparison machine keeps moving, is one of the rarest and most valuable financial skills that exist. Not because it requires advanced knowledge, because it requires resisting a psychological pull that the entire modern economy is designed to amplify. The most dangerous financial position, Housel writes, is not poverty. It's the insatiable desire for more that causes otherwise rational people to risk what they have and need for what they don't have and don't need. The people who blew up their financial lives chasing returns were not stupid. They simply never decided what enough looked like, and so there was never a reason to stop. Here's where things get complicated and genuinely counterintuitive. Housel spends considerable time on what he calls tail events. The basic idea is this: in finance, as in life, outcomes are not distributed evenly. A small number of events are responsible for the vast majority of results. A handful of days in the stock market account for most of the long-term gain. A small number of investments in a portfolio drive most of the return. A small number of decisions in a career account for most of the trajectory. This matters psychologically in a way most financial advice ignores completely, because it means that the goal of a sound financial strategy is not to be right most of the time. It's to survive long enough that the rare right decisions can have their full impact. This reframes failure entirely. Most investors who fail don't fail because they made consistently bad decisions. They fail because they made one catastrophic decision that ended the game before the tail events could occur. They got scared during a downturn and sold everything. They took on debt to chase a return that didn't materialize. They were in the right investment, but not for long enough. They didn't lose the argument. They lost the ability to stay in the argument. Housel's term for this principle is getting and keeping the goalpost of survival. It sounds unambitious. In a culture that celebrates bold moves and spectacular wins, merely surviving doesn't feel like a strategy. But across long time horizons, the person who survives with modest gains consistently beats the person who swings for spectacular returns and occasionally blows up. Because the person who survives gets to compound. And compounding is the closest thing to magic that finance actually contains. $100 compounded at 7% for 40 years becomes nearly $1,500. Not because of brilliant investment choice, because of time and the refusal to interrupt the process. The variable that matters most is not return rate, it's duration. And duration requires one thing above all others: survive. There's one final piece of Housel's framework that cuts closest to the psychological core of why money is so hard. He distinguishes between being rational and being reasonable. Rational means mathematically optimal. It means making every decision according to the formula that produces the best expected outcome given the available information. It's the approach financial theory assumes everyone is making. Reasonable means good enough given that you are a human being with emotions, relationships, fears, blind spots, and a finite tolerance for stress. Housel's argument is that reasonable beats rational for most people most of the time. Not because the math is wrong, because a strategy you can actually stick to, a strategy that doesn't cause you to lie awake at night, that doesn't create friction with your spouse, that doesn't require you to suppress your emotional responses to market volatility, is worth more than the theoretically optimal strategy you'll abandon under pressure. This is the deepest psychological insight in the book. Financial decisions are not made in a spreadsheet. They are made under stress in relationships with incomplete information by human beings who feel things. And any strategy that doesn't account for how you will actually behave, not how you would behave if you were perfectly rational, is not a strategy at all. It's a fantasy. You are not trying to optimize your financial life. You are trying to build something that works, that you can maintain, that compounds over time, and that doesn't destroy you emotionally in the process. The best financial plan is not the one with the highest projected return. It's the one you can actually execute across decades without breaking down. That's not a compromise. That's wisdom. So what does any of this mean for the way you actually think about money? It means your financial behaviors are not character flaws. They're psychological responses to the specific world you experience. They made sense once. Some of them still make sense. Some of them are patterns that were protective in one context and are destructive destructive in another. And the work of improving your financial life is not primarily mathematical. It's psychological. It's understanding where your beliefs came from, what they were responding to, and whether they still serve you. It means the flashiest display of wealth you see is probably the least amount of actual wealth you'll ever observe. Real wealth is invisible. It's the option, not exercise. The spending not done. The quiet compounding that nobody photographed. It means the goalpost will always move unless you consciously decide where to plant it. And deciding what enough looks like is not giving up. It's opting out of a race designed to have no finish line. And it means that survival, the boring, unspectacular, long game principle of simply not ending the game prematurely, is the single most underrated financial strategy available to ordinary people. Not because it's the most exciting, because it's the one that actually works across time. You don't need to be brilliant. You don't need to predict the market. You don't need to find the perfect investment. You need to understand yourself well enough to make decisions you can live with for long enough that time can do its work. That's the psychology of money, and it's available to everyone. If this resonated with you, I'd really appreciate you subscribing. And if you want to support these deep dives, consider becoming a channel member. Your support genuinely means a lot. I've got more videos coming that I think you'll connect with. Different topics, same kind of depth. I'll see you in the next one.